Welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Lens with your hosts, Jake and Scott. And as you could hear, I'm a little rusty. We went on fall break last week, and Scott and I are getting back into the swing of things here at work and life. And so we are going to be talking a little bit about what's happening in bourbon, our top craft distillers that you need to try right now, and just catch up on life. So sit back and buckle into the latest episode of the Bourbon Lens. Scott, it is 4 days post fall break. Have you dug out of email hell yet?
I feel like it's a never-ending cycle because they just keep coming.
Yeah, I was talking to Lauren. She's like, every time I go and do my email in basket, it just fills right back up again. It's like, why did I even bother?
Yeah, and you get an email on Monday or Tuesday, and then the person writes you back the next day like, hey, have you had a chance to look at this? And I'm like, if you only knew. Like, yeah, I've looked at it because I saw it come in, but nope.
I saw your name. Yeah, no, I'm definitely there with you on that. It's been a little bit chaotic, but all in all, I think it's good to take a break. I think I gave myself a B- on the ability to walk away from work. There was a few things I had to take care of, but my goal is on the next vacation to be an A. And I want to really get an A on my next vacation about really truly unplugging. It's hard when you're in a sales role, but like, I think it's hard for any of us, right? We all feel like our life's important, but I was talking there's a book called The Tyranny of the Urgent, right? And it's like, whatever the urgent thing is always seems the loudest, but is it the most important, right? So kind of leaning into that.
A false sense of urgency. It's kind of like the boy who cried wolf, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is this urgent? And if it's treated like urgent, then the next time you come and say something's urgent and it's really not, then am I going to be, maybe to the bottom of the list? But
Yeah.
I did see something I liked yesterday via email. Our friend Mark at Whiskey Del Bloc sent an email, and in the subject or in the signature line, it said, my working hours might not be your working hours. If you are outside of working hours, don't feel obligated to reply.
Nice. I like that. And I think it's really appropriate since he's a West Coast guy and whatever time Arizona is right now.
Yeah.
They live their own world, but I think that's really appropriate. And it's very interesting just to see how different generations react to you actually taking off, right? Because the older generation, they don't know what it's like to not work. Our parents, have kind of a little bit of in between that and they're retiring. And then you have us that are left to figure out what the hell's going on.
Well, and just like the constant sense of connection. Like, imagine if you went on vacation 20, 30 years ago, there was no Teams. There was like instant messenger, but nobody really used it for work. But it was basically email and then your landline. But like, you go out of town for a week, the only way they're going to reach you is if they have your number of where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you could truly disconnect. Now you can't. Everybody's connected. Your personal phone typically has your work emails on it, vice versa. You can't really disconnect. It's always, there's like, oh, well, if I can't get a hold of him, it doesn't mean he's dead. It means he's busy, but I'm going to just keep reaching out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's definitely interesting, but learning as I get older that the important things are the people that are right in front of me, right? My wife, my kids, my parents, and just being present. I think for the longest time I've been inundated with my phone. My wife reminded me, she's like, you're on your phone a lot lately. I'm like, yeah, I need to do a better job, right? I need to be more present. And so that's the goal. If you don't hear from me as quickly as you used to, or you don't get an email as fast as you used to, I'm busy being present in what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And then just the attention strain, right? Like you can't just sit and work on a task for an hour
Mm-hmm.
because there's a bell going off in the background. There's your email alert going off, phone's ringing. You can't just devote 1 hour to a task.
Yep. Yep.
So,
well,
it's a worthy cause. Hopefully we can do better. I think that taking breaks does help. It helps you kind of put that in perspective, and it always gets lost whenever you're really just grinding.
yeah, for sure. And so as we lament a little bit here on that, we'll switch gears into a more somber subject as well. Is the sky falling when it comes to whiskey? I feel like the alarms or bells are going louder and louder than they ever have been before. Kentucky Distillers Association talked about barrel tax reaching an all-time high as we have over 16 million barrels aging in the great Commonwealth of Kentucky. And, in my mind, I don't understand how all the tax regulation works, but it feels like we should get rid of these allocation things and just flood the market. I don't know if that's the right way to do it, but that's the way I see it in my mind. Is like, if we've got so much aging, get it in the market and let the consumers do what the consumers are going to do, because they want higher quality product, and you all have it. Well, you all, and I assume that's how that works, but we need to have Eric Gregory on for round two to understand this a little bit more.
Yeah, we'll continue that conversation because, yeah, there's a lot that's happened, even in that short period of time, that month or so.
I mean, and you have all the tariff stuff and everything, and thank God I've disconnected. I got off X completely. Like, I'll send like some things here and there, but it became the political wild, wild west, whether you're Democrat, Republican, neutral. It's just like, that's all it was. And so, I removed myself from that, thank the Lord. And so, I'm not as up on all the political things and what's happening from that landscape, which was, good to know a little bit, but you know what? I feel like less is more sometimes. Like, I need to be inundated with the things that I can control, not with the things I can't control. Cause all it's going to do is like make me anxious or pissed off or any of those adjectives. So trying to, make my life a little more simple. How about that?
Yeah, removing some anxiety is always a good goal.
Yeah. I mean, like, we talk about connectedness, whether it's on vacation, but like even here, it's like, be present with the moments that you got overall. Like, you only got, the only thing you can't get more of is time. Every second that goes by is gone. You're not going to get it back.
Yeah, you're
So
right.
look at me being introspective and sound like a sage old Yoda type person, but
Sounds like you've been sitting in a leather chair in a dark room with a nice glass of old aged whiskey and maybe a cigar and reflecting on life.
I don't have anything to swirl. I'm just swirling my hand since it's
Yeah.
midday as I record this. I think it's time to be a little more introspective. I don't take time to like evaluate life that much, but it's okay to retreat and take some time away from stuff, whether it's a sport, a spirit. I know some people are doing sober October, or shout out sober bourbon girl, give her a little love right there, or anything else, right? It's okay to take a step back and remove yourself to recharge. We don't recharge enough. And I feel like we're all running both ends of the proverbial candle. And, you want your light to shine bright. You don't want it to be a dull light in a crazy world. So take some time to retreat.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
No, but let's press forward into a positive note, because a lot of our friends, as we talk about the chaos and around the bourbon and whiskey world, a lot of our friends, and I feel like they are friends or family at this point, are the craft distillers. You did a great job standing up a ton of relationships during COVID, and they've just fostered over that time. And I would be remiss if people didn't realize my appreciation for Scott Dilley during COVID and setting up all the podcasts during COVID with all these great distilleries around the country. And so, yes, I'm giving gratitude to my co-host here. But we're going to talk about craft distillers because they need us now more than ever, right? The big guys are going to survive. They're going to do what they're going to do. They're going to make great whiskey. They're going to put it out, whether it's the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection that was just announced, or Heaven Hills in 2022, or the 22 year that's going to come out next year, whatever. They're going to survive. But who's not going to survive are the people that we're not paying attention to, that need the loyal fan base to try their whiskey, and to borrow David Mandel's term, sips to lips, right? We got to be able to provide that in a meaningful way. So, Scott, you came up with this idea of talking about the top craft brands that we should be talking about in 2025. So, give a little context of what you think craft is and what we're doing with this one, because I think a lot of people could be misconstrued that we're leaving people off the list. We're focused on distillers of craft whiskey.
Yeah. I mean, when I was kind of thinking, I was, you always think like craft means smaller, but it not necessarily anymore. Like, it really means to me like independent distilleries, like distilleries that aren't owned by a large corporate conglomerate or an overseas conglomerate or whatever, even, you know, US based, but family owned or, you know, locally owned. Maybe it's a small corporation with lots of little investors, but I'm not going to get into all the ownership structure, but it's just like kind of what I perceive as those independent voices of whiskey. They're not, they're not reporting to a board or a shareholder meeting or, things like that. Their shareholders are friends, family, distillery operators, distillery workers, things like that. So, and again, this is not an exhaustive list. I think we were just kind of trying to shine some light on some of the distilleries that we are paying attention to still, and that we think other people probably should have paid attention to. If they haven't experienced them, maybe find a bottle, reach out to us and say, hey, send me a sample, like whatever.
Join the
But a lot
Patreon
of
tasting
these,
club. We have them
yeah,
on all the time.
yeah, Patreon. But it's just like the smaller guys or maybe even mid-sized guys that just need a bigger voice. And I think that that's something that we did really well during COVID, which was a similar circumstance for some of these distilleries, that they just didn't have the loud enough voice or the distribution or reach to get out and spread the word. Maybe they had great whiskey, maybe they had a lot of whiskey, but it was just kind of like for some, maybe like yelling into an empty room, which we all have experienced that in the past.
100%. That's Instagram. But one of the things I think that's interesting is to break this down a little bit, right? So want to start with distilleries and craft distilleries that control the estate, right? So thinking about brands that are estate grown, estate led. Obviously, we couldn't do a podcast on craft whiskey without talking about two people that are near dear to us, Colby and Ashley Frey. I think they are kind of lead the estate conversation, but there's many others. And, the other one that I would think, which is in the other end of that as well, which would be Minden Mill, which was featured on the podcast this week. So those are two right off the bat that I think of, West Coast even, that are more grain to glass type of distilleries.
Yeah, I mean, it got me thinking like, oh, wow, a lot of these independent distilleries are, farm distilleries where you go out to the middle of nowhere and that's what you get. It's not in a big city. It's not in even in a small city with lots of distilleries like Bardstown. But one that popped in mind for me was Cedar Ridge. I mean, they were introduced to us several years back and we tried their bourbons and their single malts are just, I think, some of the top in the nation. And their limited releases, the Quintessential series, amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But that was kind of one on my list outside of Frey Ranch. Locally, Starlight. I know that we've talked about that with our wives, getting over to Starlight again now that it's fall and people are picking pumpkins and the weather's changing. It's cooled down. Mm-hmm. That's a perfect place to go. Drink whiskey, drink wine. That's another thing, that similarity with Cedar Ridge. Started as a winery, just like Starlight, and now they make incredible whiskey. So, and Starlight just released a 10-year, which is crazy.
It is crazy. The other one that I was thinking of is we were just sitting here talking about, and we didn't like pump this so much, and they have a very interesting thing on rye whiskey, was the Merced rye, and that's Corbin Cash. That's another one, California, right? You would think there'd be a lot more heartland types of family distilled, and maybe we're just not familiar with all of them, but those are ones, if you're looking for something a little bit unique and different, you can get something a little bit unique and different at each of those locations, whether that is Merced rye or that farm strength bourbon from Frey Ranch, or the really unique finished American single malt from Minden Mill, or Cedar Ridge and Starlight, obviously, wine, bourbon, single malt, bloody, like those two guys. It would be interesting to be in a conversation with Christian, Huber, and Murphy. That would
if they haven't sat down.
Yeah, if they haven't, it'd be interesting
in the past. It would be definitely an interesting conversation.
Yeah. So, moving on from there, then there's, regions, right? Like, so if we were to look at like the Southeast region, so we'll look at this more like football and not the Big Ten that's got like the entire country. We're just gonna look at like the Southeast, Southwest, Northwest, Midwest, and Northeast. So we'll start in the Southeast because that's where we are. Kentucky, yes, we're Southeast. Everyone else, sorry, that's where we are. I don't know what else to say. It's just like, we're not going to be a redhead stepchild. We're in the Southeast. All right. So what are some distilleries that you think of when you think about the Southeast that are standing up from a craft distilling perspective?
For me, it's just going down to Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody kind of overlooks any Tennessee whiskey. Everybody already overlooks Tennessee whiskey because there's the big guy. But Old Dominic, featured on the podcast, great whiskey. Memphis, they've got a wheat whiskey, bourbon, got a Tennessee whiskey. I'm sure they have others. Rye, I'm sure, but I don't recall that we talked about their. But then also like Chattanooga whiskey, who's still doing experimental things, crazy finishes, crazy releases with not just whiskey, but other spirits and liqueurs and things like that. They're just doing things different. And then they've got their consistently good Tennessee high malt, which is a bourbon, but it's high malt, kind of like Boulder. They like that style. I think that it brings a lot of character to a bourbon. Yeah, and then in terms of like Southeast, man, did I have another one on my list? I don't think I did.
I'm ready to unload. I've been thinking about this for like the whole time you've been talking.
I have a sneaking suspicion of who you're gonna say.
Oh, well, so I'm gonna throw one off first because I've never had this whiskey, but I know a lot of people talk about it. ASW, out of Georgia. I think they're doing some really cool things. If you're listening to this podcast, we'd love to work with you. We'd love to have you on, try your whiskey. The Fiddlers look amazing. It's a cool bottle. I think the other one in Georgia that I think about is Old Fourth, right? So short barrel, and we've had Clinton on to talk about that. But they bought Old Fourth Distillery, and they've got that revitalized and going in a big way. And then you go to the Carolinas, and you've got I think two there. You have Statesville, which is Southern Star, again rye, American single malt, bourbon, and contract distilling. So they're helping out a lot of other brands there. And then whether that's people like Cook's Mill or Oaklore that are there. And then the other one I was thinking about is our favorite man that talks about corn. We haven't had them on in a very long time, but Highwire Distilling, right? If we don't mention Highwire, we've kind of missed that out. And then I was thinking about our boy Embellish. He dropped a podcast this week talking to JT Mellick and Rice Whiskey out of Louisiana. So those are a couple out of the Southeast that I was thinking about that I think are unique. It's going to be interesting. Clyde Mays is going to come online and they're going to produce their own stuff. So it'll be interesting to see what they do over the next several years in Alabama. So I think there's some things. And then Rocktown in Arkansas, another interesting one. Look at
Yeah,
me. I'm pulling stuff from the deep.
Yeah, I don't know that is Rocktown Southeast. Are we just talking football?
Yeah, Arkansas Southeast. We were putting Texas Southwest though. I know
okay. Okay. What about Virginia Distillery? Is that southeast?
Yeah,
I mean, it's definitely east.
It's east. I would consider, even though there's not a Virginia team in the Southeastern Football Conference, I would consider that. And Virginia Distilling Company, great American single malt maker.
I mean, some of the best. They've got great finishes. Their Courage and Conviction line. Then they released like a reserve line and then cask finish line. So all their whiskeys are historically been very good.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll throw them in, even if I don't really think that's too south.
Yeah,
but if Kentucky's south, then Virginia surely is too, right?
Yeah, because I mean, like we'll just go northeast since we're going that way. Since you took me to Virginia next, you go up and I wanted to say Sagamore, but they're owned by a bigger brand. So I'm gonna throw one out. Another brand that I've not had is the Nantucket American Single Malt. Was it 888? I hear that is a great American single malt whiskey that they're making on Nantucket Island. I know it's very expensive from what I understand as well, but you're making whiskey on a very small little shoe and the out there in the Northeast coast. But then I go to like Taconic, the first bottle that we ever got, right? I know the leadership has changed and stuff there, but I think Taconic's a rather cool place to think about when you get into New York from a whiskey perspective.
Yeah, just rattling off, staying in New York, Kings County.
Mm-hmm.
One of the original craft distilleries.
Yep.
I know that Colin has a big diagram about what's craft, what's micro craft, what's, got to check out his book because it's very good. But I'm sure he would like to be included in that discussion as is one of the early craft distilleries.
Yeah. And
definitely independent. Definitely independent. You can tell that they do things their own way and they do what works for them. And all of their whiskey is very good, and now it's getting much older, and they're putting out some crazy proof stuff. And
yep, they are not on the underproof category like we are. They've literally released some bottles that I didn't know that whiskey could get that done.
Yeah, 160 I think is the highest one. I saw 150 something. Yeah.
And then you go to Pennsylvania, you got Liberty Pole, you got Dad's Hat, you got a lot of really good that, Monongahela or whatever, uh,
Monongahela.
Monongahela, you got all that good rye whiskey coming out of PA that, is a lot of fun, and what's really cool is Liberty Pole and Dad's Hat comboed up for collaboration recently, so I love that the 2 craft distillers are coming together, taking a little bit of what they have and making that, a little bit louder. Rising tides raise all ships.
Well, I think that they saw, what was going on with like Lost Lantern and things like that, like blends of multiple distilleries. Like, I think that's an opportunity for a lot of these craft distilleries is to say, hey, look, you have a similar style of mead, let's collaborate and do something that showcases both of our whiskeys in a interesting way. And I think, for those two brands to team up on Monongahela style rye.
Yeah. So the Northeast is interesting because a lot of it's been bought up, right? Like Widow Jane, was purchased. Obviously, is Whistle Pig purchased or is it a known brand?
I don't know that it's independent. Well, I don't know.
That's one to think about.
So sourced, and they
Distilled,
do some of their own stuff. So yeah,
snout to
but
tail.
yeah, some of their stuff is still sourced. Their older stuff.
Yeah. So that's another interesting brand in the Northeast. But going into the Midwest, right? There's a lot. And I think Ohio is tabbed with a lot of that whiskey that's coming out. You spoke about Lost Lanterns featured a bunch of Ohio distilleries in the craft brand perspective. Any of those, stand out to you?
I would say High Bank. I mean, they just started releasing their own stuff, but they do have a small, craft distillery. They also have a segment of their business which is sourced, finished, extended aging, things like that. But the stuff that came out of High Bank, the High Bank bourbon,
Hmm.
very good. And I think they just released their second or third batch of that. It's still relatively new. Um, that's a really good one.
Yeah, I think Middle West, right? They made waves. They purchased Old Elk. Tom's Foolery is also another interesting one. And then as we keep going to the Midwest, you got Whiskey Acres, which is also a unique one from a craft brand perspective. And you probably never like if it wasn't for Adam and Nora, I wouldn't know who half these brands are.
Yeah, and I think that what they're doing is highlighting the guys that need to be highlighted as well. Another one, Midwest in Indiana, Hard Truth.
Yeah, for sure.
Their sweet mash bourbon, sweet mash rye, full of flavor. That's like a really good example of what sweet mashing can do.
Yeah, I gotta get there. I gotta get up to Brown County, Bloomington
Now's a
area.
great time to go. The fall.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
let's make a trip with the wives.
Yeah, just gotta make time, man. That's the thing is like time, time. Time's
There's
hard.
never any time.
There's never any time. We're gonna skip a couple states, and they're not flyover states. We're just gonna keep going west, and we'll go up to the northwest area. And they just released their latest. They were owned and a part of a conglomerate. They've moved out of that. Again, they reformed through bankruptcy, and that's westward, right? And they just released their latest milestone.
Hold on, were they owned by somebody?
They were in the accelerator program that
Diageo?
Diageo had, and then when they shut that down, they lost funding, so that's why they filed bankruptcy, and then they reorganized.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, Westward, another one. It's always, to me, seemed like a very independent distillery. American single malt, again. Pacific Northwest single malts are incredible.
Well, then you go just a little bit north and you go to McCarthy's, right? Or like the Hood River Distillers. Like they're producing a variety of different things, but the originators of American single malt really in a lot of ways. Caitlin and that team, if you want to listen to a good podcast, go check out the McCarthy's episode with Caitlin Bartlemay. It was a really good one. Had a lot of fun with that one. And then you kind of come down, right? And you go through Colorado and Utah, and into like Arizona and Texas in that region. And there's quite a few. I mean, I think we could probably spend 20 minutes talking about Colorado whiskey.
Yeah, Laws comes to mind. That's a podcast that we've been meaning to have for the longest time, just never had an opportunity to make it work. But their whiskeys are very good. I've had their 4-grain bourbon, their rye, and one more limited release, but it's been a little while.
Mm.
But when I've had those, really good whiskeys. Colorado just makes good whiskey.
Yeah, I think it's the way it's shaped up, there. Obviously, Breckenridge is a good one, and then you have Boulder, that's also a great craft brand that you can support in the American single malt bourbon category. And then Texas, I feel like it's its own thing, right? Like Texas has, Still Austin and Garrison Brothers, and I'm sure there's many more.
Yeah. I'm gonna
Someone
have to go
else,
back in this episode and be like, need to have them on the podcast. Need to have them on the podcast.
yeah, we could have a whole year of craft. Could 2026 be the year of craft distilling on the podcast? It'd take a lot of planning, so probably not.
Yeah, yeah. Because they have limited staff. You get a big brand and they've got brand reps and distillers and production people and local people all over. But you go to a craft distillery, they've got like 4 guys. And they're like,
Mhm.
well, he's running the still and he can't have time to talk on the podcast.
For sure. And, if you have craft brands that you're interested in, we'd love to know. I think that's the greatest thing is that's not an exhaustive list, as Scott said here at the beginning, but there's a list of, probably 20 or 30 distilleries that we talked about. Let us know what you think of those craft brands. Let us know what other craft brands you would recognize. There's one I feel like we'd be remiss because we think that they're a lot bigger than they are. It's actually here in Kentucky, Peerless. Got to shout out my boy John Wadle.
Yeah. Yeah. Talking about, sweet mash like we were with Hard Truth. They do it right as well. And their single barrels are incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. But as always, we love to have you interact with us. Come back to the next podcast episode. And we'd love to have you there, and we'll catch you next time. Cheers.
Cheers.